Malcolm, my friend, first of all, congratulations on the book and the success of it. You know, the Trump 1980s era is kind of fascinating because he had this fixation with Russia to the point where he got fooled by a fake Gorbachev imposter who showed up at Trump Tower, and he was so eager, he's shoving his way through the crowd. I think we have video of it. He shoves his way through the crowd to get to this guy to try to talk to him in 1988, and he really billed himself. There he is, like pushing his way. Let's see, can we hear it? Here comes Trump.
He's just come down very briefly. We were on our way. You wanted a couple of minutes.
I like your tie.
Right color. I hope we didn't disturb your schedule.
No, it was beautiful, and I heard, and I couldn't have been happier. Very good. I couldn't have been happier.
So, Malcolm, if you go back to that Donald Trump, the person who was really fixated on Russia and saw himself as a potential interlocutor, would Russians have paid attention to him from then all the way until now?
Yes, and there are documented Soviet-era intelligence reports and intelligence evaluations of Donald Trump from the Czech Republic, which at that time was Czechoslovakia and was part of the Warsaw Pact. And of course, all of those reports, the Czech intelligence agencies were feeder agencies to the KGB. They would have known about Donald Trump. They would have evaluated him as potentially an asset to see whether he could be used. And they could place, of course, their Russian, at that time Soviet, meta-narrative around him that Trump is for what they are for. That wouldn't actually take place. I think what really took place is by the time the post-Soviet Union, led by the ex-KGB director, Vladimir Putin, he would still use that information, that background, to develop his own picture around Donald Trump and then craft a meta-narrative around Trump using his oligarchs that Trump would adopt, to the point where Trump would think it's all his own idea. And that's how we got to where we are today.
And it's interesting that, you know, Vladimir Putin was a case officer, I believe, in East Germany at the time that Donald Trump was getting fooled by the fake Gorbachev and saying he could negotiate a nuclear deal with Russia. Ambassador McFaul, Malcolm Nance talks about this idea of Trump sort of adopting and imbibing the Russian narrative about the world. Here is an example of what seems to be exactly that. I just want you to tell me if you've heard an American talk like this, or an American president talk like this before. Here's Donald Trump criticizing NATO.
I said, you know, Angela, I can't guarantee it, but we're protecting you, and it means a lot more to you than protecting us, because I don't know how much protection we get by protecting you. And then they go out and they make a gas deal, oil and gas from Russia, where they pay billions and billions of dollars to Russia, okay? So they want to protect against Russia, yet they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and we're the schmucks that are paying for the whole thing.
I mean, he's doing it in his sort of Comic Sans font version of his speeches, but it is kind of the way Russia views the world, no?
Well, yes and no, but let's just be clear that many things that he just said were not true. And when he said in that first clip that he's been preparing all his life for his meeting with Vladimir Putin, he's got to do a little more homework to understand what NATO is and to understand what Nord Stream is. First of all, we're not paying for that Nord Stream 2 pipeline that Germany is negotiating with Russia. I think it's a bad deal personally. The United States is not paying for it. Number two, when he says they've never defended us, that is just not true. We were attacked on September 11th. And then our NATO allies, including Germany, went to Afghanistan with us, tens of thousands of soldiers, to fight with America. They weren't attacked, we were attacked. And if I'm not mistaken, Joy, I think 54 German soldiers died in Afghanistan. So I'd like President Trump to go talk to those families and say, you don't do anything for us. And then number three, he's leaving out a very important fact. We have a national security interest in peace in Europe. Europe is one of our greatest trading partners, as a whole, our greatest trading partners. We benefit from peace. If we don't have NATO in place, there could be war. And by the way, we know what that looks like. It's called World War I and World War II. And so peace through strength, that idea that Ronald Reagan talked about, is in America's national interest, irrespective of how much Germany spends on its defense budget. So I'm for increasing the spending, but President Trump just doesn't understand what alliances are about, and he demonstrated that in that speech in Montana.
Yeah, and then on top of that, Malcolm, he seems to view Vladimir Putin as a potential friend of his personally, but also as almost somebody he would take advice from. This is Donald Trump on Fox News on June 14th. Talking about this is how he would speak with Putin if he met with him one-on-one at the G7.
As an example, if Vladimir Putin were sitting next to me at a table instead of one of the others, and we were having dinner the other night in Canada, I could say, would you do me a favor? Would you get out of Syria? Would you do me a favor? Would you get out of the Ukraine? Get out of Ukraine. You shouldn't be there.
And this on top of the fact that, by the way, he also apparently gives out his personal cell phone number to any leader that he meets. He just randomly gives it out. He just gives it out. White House aides have been alarmed that he just hands out his personal cell phone number and says, give me a call on my cell. There's been, but the idea that he would view Putin as someone to ask for advice on foreign policy, your thoughts?
Well, Donald Trump sees Vladimir Putin as not a competitor, as not an adversary, but possibly a mentor, to be quite honest. We do not know the extent of Donald Trump's clandestine communications with Vladimir Putin. Let's be honest, there have been indicators that he has spoken to Putin behind the backs of the entirety of the United States. Example, that secret or not so secret meeting between Mike Pompeo, then director of the CIA, Dan Coats, the director of national intelligence, and the three members of Russian intelligence, two of whom were on the sanctions list, did not materialize out of nowhere. That materialized out of a communication between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, where Donald Trump invited those Russians to the United States. There is no other way that meeting took place without that. We learned that Trump spoke to Putin in January, and Putin told him that if the United States were to cancel war games with South Korea, that would go a long way to getting Kim Jong-un to the table. Donald Trump did that. I think when he goes and meets with Vladimir Putin, he is going there for counseling. He is going there to get the advice on what he thinks is going to be the great realignment of the world. And that realignment is moving America out of the Atlantic Alliance and away from the United States or Washington to great European capitals pole as it's existed since World War II, to a Moscow-driven pole where Moscow will be the leader and Donald Trump will be his subordinate.